right, everybody, our next topic here, we're going to shoot across the universe into a galaxy far, far away here. So we got a pretty interesting topic here. And one that, once I read through this and kind of heard what was going on here, I was honestly kind of bummed me out, if I'm not going to, if I'm being totally honest here. So we got some, like, I guess, like, confirmation, some news here of what George Lucas's plans for what his sequel trilogy was going to be. And it's worth noting here that when Disney bought Lucasfilm, he gave over like all the scripts and previous stuff he had written for this sequel trilogy, and like essentially, not that they couldn't, but because they bought everything from him, but he gave it all to him so they could use it, and if they wanted to, right? Obviously, especially now that we have this information, we know that they did not use any of it. And I think George has already came out and said uh, that they didn't use any of that stuff. Like once the sequel trilogy came out, I mean, he obviously knew that he knew what he wrote, and what he wrote is not what was presented to us on screen. And now that we have this information here, John, I'll tell you what, this sounds like a much better movie. Like, not that like I
Uh,
hated everything about the sequel trilogy by any means, but this
this would have been a better series by
oh
far.
yeah, this would have been. I mean, it had a lot more potential. That's for sure. At
Yeah.
least in my opinion. Because just to give it a rundown here, if you guys haven't seen it, so Darth Maul would have been essentially the big bad in this, which I think would have made everybody happy. Because ever since the prequels, I think everybody was pretty bummed out when they introduced such a cool looking character. And they did what they did with the Emperor with Darth Maul in a lot of ways, like the Emperor from the original trilogy, where you didn't really know anything about him.
Yeah.
Like he was just like an ominous guy there. You knew that was like powerful and whatnot. And they did. Darth Maul had like he had one line, I think. Doesn't he just say "Yes, Master" in Phantom Menace, and that's it? I don't think he says
Yeah.
anything else.
It's
Like,
yeah.
but he has like no lines. He looks cool as hell, and he's got this dope double bladed lightsaber. He has this badass fight with Obi-Wan and Qui Gon Jinn, but then they just kill him, quote unquote. I mean, he lived on in the animated series and everything, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But this just would have been so much cooler. So we have Darth Maul being the big bad guy, trained a girl Sith who would have been Darth Talon, who was in like the comics and everything as his apprentice. And
Such a cool name too.
it is a great name, yeah, it's super great. But the like George goes on to describe her as essentially being the new Darth Vader, whereas Darth Maul takes on the role of being the Emperor. So as soon as like the Empire is fallen, Maul kind of fills the void and takes that power. Which, if you've seen the Clone Wars stuff and everything and Rebels, it actually is exactly like what his character would have done. Like you,
Yeah.
like you totally see like that's kind of what he was doing the entire time. Like he takes over Mandalore and everything. Like he's trying to seize a very similar power. He feels that he was betrayed by Sidious because he was betrayed by Sidious in a lot of ways, and he's trying to seize his own power, and make it his own empire. Essentially, doesn't really get the chance to too much, but maybe if he had Darth Talon by his side and the Empire's fallen, he definitely would be able to do that. Actually, according to George, that's exactly what would have happened. So, and I feel like too, that's a much better. It's much better. I don't know what the ending for this would have been for Maul, obviously, but it would have been better than the ending we got for Maul because
Yeah.
he got kind of sideswiped and beat by Old Man Kenobi pretty easily. And I would have much rather seen this even over like because I like the stuff they did with Darth Maul and like Rebels and everything and the Clone Wars and stuff. Like it was fine, but it's not as cool as like this would have been, in my opinion. I
Yeah.
know we don't have a lot of information here with it, but and then goes on to say that like by the end of the trilogy, Luke would have rebuilt much of the Jedi. There would have been a renewal of the New Republic. Princess Leia, Senator Organa would have became the Supreme Chancellor in charge of everything. And so, in fact, Leia ends up becoming the chosen one, essentially, according to Lucas, which is super cool as well. Like all
Mhm.
this is cool. Um, that's pretty much all we really get about it. Like that, yeah, that's all the info we really have on it. But like, That's just oh, I guess too. I guess I should add that Luke Skywalker would have been trying to rebuild the whole Jedi Order from scratch and like training, a new Jedi's to do their thing, just like Yoda and all them had in the prequels.
Yeah.
But yeah, this would have been really cool, man. And like when I read through this, like obviously, like I said, I was kind of bummed out. Like I was super bummed out because we got Darth Maul has always been one of my favorite characters. Just like I said, kind of when we started this off, he looks cool. He was always such a dark, anonymous character. I did like the stuff that they did with him in Clone Wars and Rebels. Obviously, like he's just a great character. He's cool, and but they didn't use him well, in my opinion, in the prequels. And if George always kind of had some underlying plan to bring him back, then what they did with him in the prequels kind of makes more sense. Like it would have been a lot better. Like
Yeah.
so, I don't know. I was kind of bummed out. What did you think about all this though?
I'm gonna go off on a little bit of a tangent or a rant or a tangent here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying. I don't even know. I have so many thoughts and feelings on this. I'm not really sure I know where to start. First of all, I think yes, it would have been a much cooler resolution to the Skywalker saga, as it were, than what we ended up getting. I There are days I wake up and I feel like it seems like there are a lot more, especially since Disney has gotten involved, where I wake up and I think Star Wars should have just ended with Jedi. It should have been those three movies, the original trilogy, and that should have been it. It should have been left alone after that because they were perfect and it left everything alone, and that should have been it. And looking back on it now, the prequel trilogy, as much as the issues that it has, I actually still like the second and third one. And the first one, I can make it through just to get the story. Um, but and this is where I go off on my little trip down memory lane here. But I remember when I was like, I don't know. I must have been, I feel like I was 5, but maybe I was 6 or 7, who knows? And I remember picking up an issue of Time magazine because it had Darth Vader on the cover. It had all the Star Wars characters on the cover. Time magazine is not written for a 6 and 7-year-old kid. Um, but that magazine was like the most precious thing in the world to me because here's Star Wars. This is amazing. This entire magazine has got Star Wars in it. And I remember reading in there, I don't remember anything else about it, but I remember reading George Lucas and him saying there that Star Wars is a 9-part story. And that we had gotten, little did I know, that because I wasn't smart enough at that age to recognize that episode 1, that the original Star Wars was actually titled episode 4. I just, it was Star Wars, and then there was Empire, and then there was Jedi. I didn't realize it was episode 4, 5, and 6. And so that blew my mind to know that there were 9 parts to this story, and I had only seen 3 of them at that point. So when the prequels were announced, I was over the moon, ecstatic, because hey, I'm starting to get, this is what that 7-year-old me wanted. I wanted to know what these other 6 stories were that were missing from this, and we got them. And there were issues with them, but they still felt like Star Wars, and they were still, they ultimately, I think Sith did, Revenge of the Sith gave us a really cool story about how Anakin became Vader. And my issues aren't with necessarily how the story played out. My issues are more with like the directing and the acting, the way it was overacted or not acted as well as maybe I had hoped it would be. The overuse of CGI, but that's all nitpicky stuff that the kid in me doesn't care about. He cares about the story, and I got that. And knowing that there was this other story out there that involved Darth Maul, a character that had been established in Phantom Menace, and that George had given Disney the rest of that story, that 7-year-old kid who wanted those 9 parts. Those 9 parts existed out there, and George had them, and he gave them to Disney, and Disney said, "No, we're not doing it." I'm gonna have a hard time getting over that, and
Oh yeah.
there's a part of me that I keep telling myself, and I know it's not realistic, but there's a part of me that's always going to hope and pray that maybe one day Disney figures out a way to go back and do them. Maybe one day we'll actually get George's episodes, what, 7, 8, and 9. I know it's never going to happen. We've lost our shot at having Carrie Fisher back. Um,
Well,
you know,
this, not to interrupt, but this
no, you go ahead, man.
it could happen, but it's not going to be for 10, 20 years when they decide to reboot, like do a remake, we'll say. Because like a lot of times, when they go and do these, like reboots, they follow the original, they update it, right? Like
Sure.
A Star is Born. The movie's been made like 3 different times, right? But it's a lot of these movies get rebooted and they're essentially remade more than rebooted. And I don't think that Star Wars is necessarily off limits for that. I could totally see Disney in 20 years when they've, run the not run the franchise into the ground. They're fine, but when they've run out of ideas, just like Hollywood likes to do with a lot of things, they just go back and just remake what they do.
We'll do it again.
And like they'll
Yep.
just go through, if it works, do it again. Like,
They'll do it for a new generation, new audience.
right.
And you're totally right. And if they do that, maybe that 7-year-old me
It's
will
possible.
will be around long enough to see that happen. I
It's
hope
possible.
I hope maybe I am. It's a rock and a hard place situation because while there are days, like I said, I wake up and I think it should have just been that original trilogy and that's it. Then I wake up, I go to bed last night after just having watched the new episode of The Mandalorian, and I realize, yeah, but if they had stopped there, I wouldn't have had that episode. And we'll talk about that later, I'm sure. But I love the Mandalorian show, and I can't imagine not having not being able to see that, having all that stuff removed from the mythos and the stories and stuff. So it's a give and take. That you got to take the good with the bad, and but it's pretty heartbreaking to me to know that those exist, that those outlines or stories, or I don't know how fleshed out he had them, that they exist, and yet we're never going to see them. So
I'm totally with you. I would almost hope too, maybe before, the wishful thinking of them rebooting or remaking, the original trilogy and the prequels, and then instead of doing the remakes of the sequel trilogy, do George's instead, because that's probably the biggest stretch. Like I could totally see them redoing the original trilogy, maybe
mhm.
even redoing the prequels. But if they were to do that, like they more than likely would just remake the what we got, which and I was kind of bummed out too because I think I was telling you about this too when I first heard the story, like or maybe I was telling Rick, I can't remember. But like they could have easily done like put their own spin, included Ray and Kylo and all that stuff,
Sure,
and then still stuck with this as opposed to like have Maul come in and do his like have like keep this as like the backbone, and then they can still if they wanted Ray to be the chosen one as opposed to Leia, then like do that. Like
sure.
it could have. I don't
There's
know.
no reason Ray couldn't have been one of if the story involves Luke training a new generation of Jedi. There's no reason Ray couldn't have been part of that new generation.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
then Ben could have been there too. And but honestly, just I liked
and they
Kylo Ren as a character, but like he would have been so much cooler just as Ben Solo the whole time. Like
sure,
and like it would have been almost like kind of a thing where like because they could have had him still like battle with it. Like I'm making this up off the top of my head, but I think it sounds better than what we got. But you have Ben Solo being trained by Luke in this Jedi thing, and then like he knowing who his grandfather is and who Luke is, and knowing the story of like the chosen one and all this stuff. You could have him struggling with the light side and the dark side stuff because he wants to be the chosen one himself and like be like
yeah,
being the one who brings balance to the force and like whatever. So you could have him having his own internal struggles and stuff, but just have him be Ben Solo the whole time and not do the Kylo Ren thing where he actually is a dark agent of the dark side and all that stuff. Like throw that shit out because they end up throwing it out anyway. So they should have just never
yeah,
gone with it to begin with. And it would have been much cooler just to see that play out, like him having his own internal struggles with this stuff. And then yeah, you have Rey come in who ends up being like the true chosen one, and she could have still ended up being Palpatine's daughter, and that would have put a whole new spin on like what I mean? It was honestly like that's a better movie right there. Like
yeah.
that's way better.
But
Like
you know, but yet again, this also would have required Disney to plan out these
yeah, which
sequels
the
ahead of
biggest
time,
mistake.
which they didn't. You still could have had Finn. Finn could have been a defector from
which is
Darth
such a
Maul's
throwback.
organization. Yeah, I
Because
mean,
Finn was a great character. Like, it
yeah,
started out as a great character.
you don't have to lose any of the characters. You don't have to lose anybody. If they wanted, and I understand why Disney, as much as they want to tell the good stories, and they want their movies to do. Obviously, they want their movies to do well. They also want the marketing opportunities that come along with Star Wars, and so they want the new characters to create the new figures to sell and create the new shirts to sell and whatever. They want the new marketing opportunities, but you don't have to lose that. You can weave that into the same story. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, they had, like, JJ brought a lot of good. Their biggest problem, in my opinion, with the whole sequel trilogy is that they didn't have that plan, that ironed out
yeah,
plan for everything. They had the three different directors and writers come in and pretty much just, like, JJ set everything up, and then the other guys were just able to do whatever they wanted, essentially. And that was,
yeah,
like, the biggest mistake, because, like, I feel like JJ set up a lot of, like, interesting stuff in The Force Awakens. Like, their initial what we got in Force Awakens was, like, I'll say it was a good movie. Like, it was fine. And
mhm,
some of the stuff they set up, like, especially, like, Finn's character in Force Awakens was, like, a really cool idea. Like, a defected stormtrooper going to the rebellion, like, we hadn't seen that. So that was, like, a new idea that was good, you know? So, like, I was and, John Boyega played the role good. It was a good role. Then, like, Poe Dameron
yeah.
was a good character. They had a lot of good things set up, but then they just abandoned it all in the second one, and in the third one, they abandoned everything they did in the first one, and it was a whole mess. So, like, that was their biggest problem, in my opinion.
I can't off the top of my head think of another series of books. The only thing I can think of that comes close to what Disney did is comic books. Like occasionally in comic books, you'll have three different writers write three consecutive issues of a series, and they don't always they feel kind of disjointed because you've gotten that. But even comic books, for the most part, writers write an arc, and then they leave the book, and the book gets turned over to somebody else. On TV shows, you might have multiple writers and multiple directors working on episodes, but you've got, like we were talking about in the previous segment, you've got a showrunner that knows what the overarching story is, and provides some direction, some cohesion through this. And this is, I don't know if Kathleen Kennedy was supposed to do that, but it really didn't feel like she was doing it. It felt like the way those movies were cobbled together, that it was just scattershot. Like you
Yeah.
said, Abrams sets it up, and then Rain Johnson comes in, and Rain, do whatever you want. And besides being having to adhere to the fact that he had the characters in place, beyond that he was able to do whatever he wanted. So
Yeah, which is so weird that you'd think that, it could even be possible, like, with Disney owning Marvel and having someone like Kevin Feige in place, and they have, like, a perfect outline of just how to make something work, and they just
sure, the
under
template's
their own
there.
umbrella, yeah, like,
Yeah,
they have it there. So, I don't know. Like, which I guess, like, moving into our next we have another Star Wars topic, which is kind of a better, like, indication of, like, things to come, because one of the other things that I always complain about with the Disney era of Star Wars, other than, like, how kind of poor the sequel trilogy ended up being as a whole, was that they continue to just, like, live in this, like, too afraid to go out and tell a new story, it feels like, with Star Wars. Like, even with the sequel trilogy, they brought back all the, like, original cast, but they didn't do anything with them, so it made that kinda worse. So it's like another story for another day, I guess. But, like,
yeah,
they have this High Republic thing coming out in the books, and it's only, a measly, like, 3 to 400 years before the original trilogy, and, like, they make Mandalorian, and it's set in the same time period as everything we're familiar with. They keep doing things that are, like, familiar, as opposed to telling, like, new stories in Star Wars, like an Old Republic thing, or going way into the future and just telling a new, fresh Star Wars story. Like, all the
sure.
I mean, I get, like, or even, like, the Clone Wars and Rebels and all these things. Like, everything is, like, and I get that it works, so you wanna, like, expand on it more, but, like, there's still room for you to tell completely new stories, you know what I mean? Like, 'cause even
Hmm.
with, like, even, like, the Fallen Order game, it's, like, the same thing. It was at least a new character that you were, but it still plays in that same sandbox that we know of. Like, I don't know, it always bums me out, but there is some hope with that, and the new, there's an upcoming Disney Plus Star Wars series coming up soon that we had some word a while back that they were going to be making. There's literally no like news on what the story is going to be about necessarily, but it was supposed to be a female led and centric Star Wars project on Disney Plus. And now at this point, we still don't have a lot of information on it, but the I believe it was the showrunner or one of the writers or the co-directors. They came out and said that what they're focusing on, and if I can find the quote here, that well, essentially that in this one, for she says that it's going to be like a in its own pocket of the universe, in its own timeline that we don't know much about. So like, and that's really like all the information we got. But that's all I've ever wanted with Star Wars.
Yeah,
That's been my biggest like complaint because I like Mandalorian. It's good, and like Force Awakens was okay, but the other ones weren't really. I didn't really care for. And like I've said, like I just ranted on about for a little bit. I've just wanted new, fresh Star Wars stuff, and it seems like Disney, like more so than anything, because you got to think like back before, like pre Star Wars era Disney, they had the expanded canon, what's now
yep,
Legends, where they introduced a lot more. They still played in the same timeline sandbox, but there were a lot of like new, fresh characters like coming up all the time. Like
yeah.
some of them bad, like fine, sure, but I feel like they definitely took a lot more risk before, and I feel like
Well,
Star
I
Wars
think
they've just been playing it safe.
yeah, I think I mean you and I both are big fans of Knights of the Old Republic, and that's a perfect
So
example
good.
of taking the and that was done. I mean, what that game, the first one's what, 15 years old at this point, maybe.
Something like
Um,
that.
maybe even a little more. But that's a perfect example of not of taking the universe and the world that's been established and not being beholden to just one timeline or one not timeline but time era, just being stuck in that one era. Do something well outside the bounds of it and and give yourself the freedom to create something new and a little bit different, familiar but still a little bit different, and give people a deeper dive into that world. And I'm excited about this news. I hope that they have the guts and the courage to not be beholden to marketing dollars and that sort of thing, and do something original and fresh. Um,
Yeah.
and inject some of that excitement that I think is missing from Star Wars to a certain extent, back into the franchise. I think the Mandalorian show. I think I mean, we've talked about whether or not we talked about last week whether or not it's a good show if you remove the Star Wars elements from it and stuff. And I think it's done a very good job of injecting excitement into it. I think the surprise of Baby Yoda and the idea of Yoda not just as a character but as a race really injected some much needed excitement and mystery into the series. But this is a way to do so, like you're saying, well outside of the era that we're used to, and really give a look at a whole different Star Wars through a whole different lens. So
Yeah, because like I with that too, like you were saying with Mandalorian, like the writer of this article even says, and this is kind of how I felt about like the whole era of Star Wars. Like this line here, they says like, but when it was first revealed that Disney Plus would be making a live action Star Wars show, I was hoping for something different. Like instead, the Mandalorian feels like a shut up and play the hits kind of show.
yeah,
Which, like I said, it's good and I do like it, but I totally agree with this. Like Boba Fett's back, like like Bo-Katan's, and like all these things, like can't just be this like lone Mandalorian guy telling like there's so much cool stuff they could just expand on with Mandalore itself, which would potentially, if you stayed in this time frame, include Bo-Katan in some aspects, but like no one knows anything about that stuff because for one, it's really only been expanded on in the Clone Wars animated show for the most part, at least canon
yeah,
wise. So like, I don't know. Like, there's so much stuff they could do in like the Old Republic. I mean, just everything that's been said, even though not all of it's technically canon at this point, some of it is. Like Darth Bane is canon, So like, there's a couple things that are there that do exist in canon, but like the putting yourself 3,000 years before the original trilogy, you can do whatever you want. You know what I mean? That's kinda like the downside with making, like, a lot of prequels and things like that, is you always, like if you're too close to, the present time or whatever, then you lose a lot of like suspense and surprise because you kind of know where everything's going to go. Especially if you're doing something with like the High Republic that they're doing is literally going to like one of the stories is going to focus on a Yoda who's like 300-400 years old or something. It's like I don't care about Yoda like when he's three or four
Yeah,
hundred years old. Like it's not. I'd rather see something else. Like it could be a great story. Like Yoda's cool and everything, but like we got his story. Like, I don't need to know, like, what he was doing 300 years before the prequels. Like, who cares? Like, who
yeah,
cares? Like, I don't I really, like, legitimately don't care. And at this point, Baby Yoda is already, like, super hype. Like, we don't like, it's just and I feel like that's the only reason they're including it. It's just like, well, if Baby Yoda is so cool, then, like, we gotta just let's do more Yoda. Like,
give more Yoda. Yeah,
it's just I don't know. So, yeah, the only thing, like, I don't know, like and kinda like with what you were saying with, Disney needing those marketing bucks, like, some could argue that this, female-driven thing is only being done for, like, marketing purposes, and I'd hope it's not. I hope they just tell, like, a cool story because I don't really care either. I could give or take it being a female-driven thing, like, that's really beside the point. I just need a good story and good characters. Like,
sure.
you know what I mean? Like, it's like Bo-Katan, like, I'd like to see, like, a Bo-Katan series, like, who just made her appearance on, The Mandalorian, like that's a girl character who, like, is powerful, like, female character at that too, and that would be a cool story just to watch, but I wouldn't watch it just because it's female driven, like, really don't care
Sure.
that they're marketing the show like that, in all honesty. I just want them to make a cool story. Then you always got too, like, these, like, I don't know, just dumb people on the internet essentially who are just pretty much writing off the show because it's being described as that to begin with, and it's like I don't know. It's just kinda dumb. I could give or take it being a female-driven show. I just want new and
Yeah,
fresh Star Wars stories to be told. Like, so
yeah.
I don't care how they
Pe-
gotta do it, just do it.
People are so concerned now with either it's both sides. Like, I mean, you got one set of people out there that are so concerned with things being done and their I'm trying to think of the word I want. But their perception that it's forced diversity,
Mhm.
and then you got people on the other side and their perception that it's lack of diversity. And I, like you said, I try not to. I don't want to spend my time analyzing the shows I'm watching and the entertainment I'm taking in by through that lens. I want to sit down and watch it, and if it's good, enjoy it because it's good, and
Exactly.
like it and watch it because it's good and I want to, not because of some predisposition I have to want to support it just because it has some elements I feel like it has to have or something.
Yeah, yeah.
I
It's
don't
like
know.
I'm not gonna write it all like, I don't understand why that's the thing that annoys me is, like, people write things off because of, like, that. It's like, "You guys are just pandering to, this audience," so it's like, "I'm not even gonna waste my time with it," but it's like, you haven't even seen it, you know
You,
nothing about it.
and,
Like,
and
just
that's such a
watch it.
such a narrow-minded way to do it because you could be missing out on something that's terrific. Like,
Yeah, like, you don't know.
yeah, you have no idea.
Ridiculous.
Just oh
I don't know, it's sometimes the internet's a scary place. It's
yes, it
honestly a
is.
place you just shouldn't spend too much time on sometimes, so that's for
Yeah.
sure. But, anyways, guys, what do you guys think of all this? Especially, like, me and John and I both were pretty bummed out about, where the sequel trilogy could have gone if, they would have focused on this included more of George's original outlines for it, which I almost at this point wish we never would have known because like I said, I'm kind of bummed out because I feel like that would have gone in a better direction. Especially, I mean, hindsight's 2020. After we know what we got with the sequel trilogy, it's very easy to say that, like, obviously, that would have been better. So that's so I'll give it that much. Like, who's to say it would have been better? It sounds like it would have been better, but like, and then with the new series coming out and the showrunner or writer on it saying that they're going to be focusing on it's this own little pocket universe of unexplored Star Wars stuff. That has me excited. So that's one thing I've been wanting from Star Wars ever. God, ever since the sequel trilogy was announced, like, and before then, ever since the Old Republic was made, that's the Old Republic being as successful and great as it was it's kind of what fueled my interest for more new, fresh Star Wars stories. We still just haven't gotten it ever since then, really. So, what do you guys think of all that? Just let us know down in the comment section below.